Bryson, welcome back. It seems like just yesterday we were talking about life transitions, midlife transition, and what's really cool about what we're going to be exploring today. This in some way feels like an extension of that conversation. So
Mhm.
I'm really excited about today's conversation. You know, in a lot of the conversations I have with people, one thing that comes up constantly is this concept of being stuck in life, being numb, kind of just surviving. And I often say to people, the goal here isn't to survive, it's to thrive. And I know working with people, and even those people that are close to me, they often say, like, what does thriving mean? Like, tell us what thriving means. Is it like jumping out of planes, and is it, running across Canada, and is it doing all these crazy things just to get some form of excitement in your life? So I think it's important that we start off with this concept of thriving versus surviving. And what does it mean to thrive? And is surviving enough? Is
Mhm.
that maybe what we should be looking for? Is that kind of the end game? Play it safe, just survive, or do you want to push and experience what thriving in life really feels like? So maybe we could start with what is thriving versus surviving.
Yeah, well, I think we'll get to thriving, um, but I think it'll be easiest if we start with what does surviving look like, because that's really, really clear cut. And some people recognize that they're just in this survival mode, they're just getting by. But I think more often than not, people are still in survival mode and they don't even realize it. They think they're thriving when in reality they're actually just surviving. One thing that I point out to people a lot of the times is I ask them, when someone asks you how are you doing, how do you respond? How do you say, like, if you are just doing fine, how do you say fine? Do you say fine as like a question, like, oh yeah, I'm doing fine? Like, do you
Yeah.
need somebody to confirm and validate that you are doing fine? Or you're like, I'm doing fine. Like, or better yet, you're able to just go in and say, like, you know what, I'm actually doing really good. And you can
Yeah.
immediately think of evidence for why you're doing great. You're like, I've been really enjoying my workouts recently, or we have a family trip coming up that I'm so excited about, and I'm really looking forward to this and to that. Or work's been going great. I just got a new project that I'm really excited about, and I'm really looking forward to learning these new skills. That's really going to boost my resume. Like, whatever it is, there's something that you're excited about, and I think that's an underlying component of thriving versus surviving. Surviving feels like I'm just staying away from dying. Like, I was able to just barely pay my bills, or I got out of bed just in time to get to work, or I dragged myself to the gym and I hit my goal of working out 3 times this week. Are you barely hitting your goals? Are you dragging your feet to do these things? How do you answer the question when someone asks how you're doing? Those are all indicators if we're just surviving. And on the other hand, thriving, there's something you're excited about. And it's no longer just about just barely paying the bills and getting to work on time and clocking in and clocking out. There's something that you're excited about, and you feel like you're progressing, you're growing, and you are expanding your comfort zone. Surviving is all about staying inside of your comfort zone, because we're barely hanging on, and if we step outside of our comfort zone, we're going to die or something dangerous is going to happen. Whereas thriving is like, I'm good. I got my comfort zone nailed down. Like, I'm so comfortable here, and everything is great that I feel confident being able to step outside of it, and not being at risk of dying, or losing friendships, or taking a risky move at work. It's that confidence and that excitement about taking action that you don't normally do. There's something that's growing, there's something that's adapting. When it comes to surviving versus thriving, there are actual differences that we can measure in the brain, whether someone is more in a survival mode or more in a thriving mode. When we're in survival mode, most of our actions that we take throughout the day are more of a reflex. They're reactive. Something happens, our brain subconsciously processes something, and then we do it. We don't have enough resources, including mental resources, to take a deliberate action and to change what our default pathway would be. In fact, we're using a part of our brain. A lot of people refer to it as the reptilian brain. It's really just a primitive part of our brain that is all about efficiency and keeping us safe, which is, so that's why it's all reactions, and it's all about doing stuff to keep us in our comfort zone. Don't explore outside of your home or your cave. Stay there. That's where it's safe. That's where there's no predators. Only try the foods that you're familiar with. We don't want to risk trying something that could make us sick. Only stay close to the people that you know really, really well, because we don't know if they're an enemy or not. All of those things come from relying on it's really a deep part of our brain. It's very an ancient part, which is why people call it the reptilian brain. It evolved way before mammals and humans. And then on the other side of that, when we're thriving, we're using more of our prefrontal cortex and our associative cortex. That's, instead of being deep inside of our brain, that's the stuff on the outside. That's all the squiggles that we see on the outside of a brain. That's where we get logical thinking. That's where we get creative thinking. That's where we're able to form new connections and new experiences. It's all about experiencing the world versus having the world happen to us. So which brings up my last thing that I always ask people to help them figure out if they're in a survival mode or thriving mode. Do you feel like the world is happening to you, or you are happening to the world? And like, really think about that. And we can even go even a little bit smaller. Is my day happening to me, or am I happening to my day? Are things just happening and I'm reacting? Or am I going out and shaping my day and my experience? So I'm sure you, like, when you're working with your people all the time, I know you've asked some similar questions to this. What has been your experience with how people respond to these types of questions, or even your own experience? Because I know you went through this whole journey yourself as well.
Yeah, this is a really, I think it's a really important question. When I get asked how I'm doing, and when I ask how I'm doing, the answer I get most often is I'm getting by. Yeah, I'm getting by. I'm doing all right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you why this is so important for me, because I have a friend who at the age of 40 started to talk to me about retirement. That was what he was working towards, because that was what was going to make him happy. It was always this thing off in the future. Once I get to that retirement, I'm going to be thriving. I'm going to be happy. And at first it didn't really land how profound that statement is. Because basically what you're saying is, I'm going to give away 10, 15, maybe 20 years of your life, letting the world act on you to get to something that probably isn't going to dramatically change the way you feel anyways. Mm-hmm. The only difference is now you're older, your kids are growing up, you got less energy.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a very profound statement when people say, I'm just getting by. And I think we all have moments where we're feeling uncomfortable. I don't feel like I'm energized. I'm waking up slower with less motivation, less energy. Things that used to excite me don't anymore. I used to go with my friends, we'd laugh. I used to enjoy hobbies that don't seem to give me the same joy. So what did I do? Well, at the age of 40-ish, maybe, when 35, I really amped up the numbing component of this whole equation. I drank a lot, I partied a lot, I put myself into the noise of life, if that makes sense, to distract me. But in those quiet moments, I started to hear this signal way back in my brain that was saying, hey, it's time for change. Like, days are going by, precious days are going by. And this numb feeling, this barely surviving feeling that you have, isn't going to resolve itself. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, Bryson, when I finally got to the moment of realizing I had to take control was what spawned the initial run through the Rockies and the 2 rides across Canada that followed. I couldn't find the answer within me, but I knew there must be something out there more to life than this feeling of barely surviving, this grayness, I called it. And I went out on this journey to find answers. I believe my biggest problem is that, like a lot of people, I didn't see the issue was within me. I felt the issue was within my environment, and I could manipulate those variables. I could go out and change the way the world should think and behave so that I would be happier. Mm-hmm. And after 3 years of grinding, thousands and thousands of kilometers on the road, after the 3rd attempt, I came back and I was just stuck. Again, I felt like I was just surviving, and now I didn't have the next journey to take, and I was frozen. I was scared. And I think at the end of the day, Bryson, that's kind of where you have to be okay sitting in the shadow. Like, you have to listen to this and process it. And when I work with people, I ask them that very question. Are you thriving or are you surviving? And we can get into it in more detail, but there's dimensions in your life. Are you enjoying work? You mentioned it earlier. Mm-hmm. Do you have a great social life? Are you fit? Are you mentally happy? Do you have a purpose? It doesn't take long to establish, no, I'm not thriving. Mm-hmm. I'm just getting by. And I think, we've talked about this many times. We all get comfortable and we accept things. This is what life is. And I just want to say right now, and I think you could back me on this, that is not what life is. We've become conditioned to accept that. But for me, that's not good enough.
Yeah, there in the Live Free program and just neuropsychology, we have what we call the 6 human needs. And we're not going to go into full detail of that. That's for another time. But there's 2 of them in particular that I think are really relevant to this conversation. And these aren't just, they didn't just create a survey and ask 1,000 people what they felt they needed. Like these are based on neurophysiology. How is our brain developed, and how is it wired? What is it looking for? Besides food, water, shelter, it's like there's these things that our brain needs just as much as it needs food, water, sleep, electrolytes. And these 2 in particular are certainty and growth. And what's interesting is that certainty is the first of the 6 human needs. Like it is really foundational and fundamental. Without it, we sacrifice everything else so that we can have certainty. We don't need to be absolutely certain about everything, but we need a certain level of familiarity and predictability. Otherwise, our brain just goes crazy. And that's why it drives towards things that are going to bring comfort. Comfort is another form of certainty. When you think about, like, obviously there's comfort in, like, wow, this couch is really comfortable, my bed is comfortable. When we talk about a comfortable life, really what we're talking about is it's predictable and it's familiar and there's nothing new about it. And I know exactly how everything's going to operate. And although we need that to a certain level, sometimes our brain just, it overextends itself and it just soaks up as much certainty and comfort as possible. And consequently, in the process of doing that, we let go of any possibility of growth, because growth is really stepping outside of that certainty, familiarizing ourselves with the uncertainty, and then expanding that ring of familiarity and predictability. It's like, I don't know how the world works, and so I'm going to have to step out and go face to face with these things that I don't know. But then as I go face to face with it, then I'm able to become familiar with it. And now all of a sudden, I'm comfortable in a bigger area. I'm not confined just to my house. Now I understand how everything in my house works, and everything in my backyard. And then everything in my neighborhood, in my city, and then in the world, and it just keeps going. And that's also one of the key indicators for if we're stuck in this comfort crisis is, are we growing? Are we facing anything new that would like encourage us to grow? A lot of us, most of the time, growth is like growth comes from these external factors, things that are happening outside in the world around us that kind of force us to grow. So like high school, college, if we have, postgraduate work, a new job, becoming a parent for the first time, getting married, new relationships, all of those things are external factors that encourage us to grow. But what happens is that most of us, once we run out of those external factors that encourage growth, we don't have anything else set up to encourage more growth. Let's say you're married, your kids are in high school, you're established in your career, you're not really moving up further in the career ladder, and there's no more education for you to really achieve, at least formal education. What are you going to do to put you outside of your comfort zone? Or in other words, how are you going to grow? Because if you're not actively trying to grow, then by definition, we're staying inside of our comfort zone. There's nothing new or unfamiliar. And that is one of the things that pushes us slower and slower to the surviving, where we're not going out, we're not getting excited about things, we're not learning new things. We're not having to use other parts of our brain. We're just, if everything is familiar, we can rely on reflex and on just reactions that we have. If everything is predictable, our brain predicts it for us, and we wake up every day and we do this and we do that and we say hi to so-and-so and we do this and we show up to work and we do that and then we clock out and we go home and then we repeat. There's nothing new in there. There's nothing for you to do as a person. At this point, they could replace you with a robot. We need things that are going to challenge existing pathways in our brain, that are going to encourage us to get outside of our comfort zone. And whether that's something hard physically, whether it's something hard socially, whatever it is, something that's going to encourage us. And unfortunately, that's something that we're going to have to be in charge of. Like, if we don't have any school or a new job that's opening up for us, those things aren't going to happen externally. They need to start from inside of us. And this is exactly what I think happened with you whenever you left your career and then went and cycled across Canada and did all your runs and all your endurance feats. You realized that you were so comfortable and you weren't growing at all, and that you were numbing that feeling of not growing with everything that you listed off earlier. So you went out and you found something to challenge you, to force you to grow. And in the process of getting out of that survival mode of just reacting and doing the same thing over and over again, you stepped into a state of thriving. Granted, your thriving process was a lot more dragged out and more new. Excuse me, a lot more nuanced and complicated than just the physical endeavors. But that was a kickstart, and I think people need more things like that in order to switch from thriving to surviving.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that you say that, because I think another key element to this whole conversation, and then I'm going to ask you about the signs or symptoms that will tell somebody they may not be thriving. But for me, I just want to finish your point off by saying, even when you start to identify areas of growth, you could go out and take a course, you could go run a marathon, you can change jobs like I did, and you could become more aggressive and try more and more things. For some people, it feels like, I'm going to work harder to buy another car, or I'm going to take another job because it's got more money. They're looking for something that stimulates that I'm living again. Mm-hmm. I find the problem is that as you get older, not only are you challenged to grow, But those things that used to make you grow don't work anymore. It's like, yeah, I got a bigger, better job, but the first job was still the most exciting. I bought a bigger and better house. Yeah, but I still really remember the excitement of buying my first house. I ran my 15th marathon, but nothing felt better than the first marathon I ran 10 years ago. So I think it's really important for people to understand that at some point, when you look for opportunities to grow, it's not always out there. It's not always going and finding the next thing to do and the next piece of excitement to chase. At some point in your life, and you talk about this in one of the videos in the program, embrace the growth, the process of becoming the person you want to become. Understand who that person is and embrace the growth towards it. A lot of it for me now has to do with learning and understanding the human condition. It's not riding 10,000 kilometers. It's actually understanding like how people think and behave. And the other thing that's really made a difference for me, Bryson, to be very honest, is looking for things that are bigger than me. It's funny, I bought the first car. I felt great. I felt like my world was really thriving. But now I want to start to help people. I think when you see somebody's face have a moment of realization, and in that moment you've realized you helped them, that's the reward. And I just want to make sure that people understand that they can't always revert back to the same playbook. At some point, you have to challenge your playbook. Not only do you have to challenge your comfort, but you also have to challenge your playbook. Things are going to change as you age. As you grow up, as your kids grow up, as your job kind of winds down, you're at this point in your life, this crossroads, and you really have to understand, how am I going to achieve ongoing growth? My ability to thrive as I get closer and closer to end of life. So it's a super exciting conversation, but what I will say before we get on to the signs and symptoms is don't waste time. This doesn't solve itself. It doesn't solve itself. Again, I have friends sitting around talking about retirement one day like it is the silver bullet, and it's not. It's so much more complex than that.
Yeah. Well, if I could, just to reiterate your point and put a plug for the last podcast that we did. If you haven't already, go and watch the podcast we did about midlife transitions and midlife crises, because to sum it up, the things that were driving forces and factors for us in our 20s biologically don't matter to us as much. We call it the dopamine plateau, where originally we're out looking for excitement and thrill and new things and achievement and these ambitious feats, right? And then it varies for every single person, but everybody goes through this. If you have a brain, your brain is going to go through this process. Those things stop mattering to us, and we start looking more inwards. Instead of external fulfillment, we're looking for internal meaning and purpose. And it could still be like, yeah, I'm still going to have a super successful career, and I still want to buy that car. But it's not so much the buy a flashy car for the sake of a flashy car. All of a sudden, it's more of I'm going to buy this car because of what it means to me. So your entire reward system gets rewired to be more internally driven, and everybody goes through that process. So we're not going to repeat that entire podcast now, but if you haven't already, go and watch it, because it applies to everybody, whether you're about to go through that process or you already have, or you're right in the middle of it. Whatever it is, everybody is going to, it is relevant and applicable to everybody.
So Bryson, great conversation on the whole concept of thriving versus surviving. But it's not so easy just to go to the doctor and say, doctor, my world feels off. Like there's something going on. I'm not happy. I'm more often, feeling unmotivated. I don't wake up every day feeling energized. If there was a doctor, what would that doctor say are the symptoms of not thriving? How can one tell if they're actually not thriving?
I think, well, when it comes down to it, this is a nervous system thing. This is a brain thing. And so I can give a huge list of examples. In fact, I have some that I wrote down in my notes that I'll just read them off at one point a little bit later. But I want to go back to the principles and what's actually happening in your nervous system. And I think that'll help people understand where they're at, even if I don't list their specific symptom. So the whole purpose of the nervous system can be boiled down to three primary functions: take in sensory information, process that information, take action. That's everything our brain does falls under one of those categories. So essentially there are three things that we can do with our brain. We choose what we focus on. We choose the meaning that and the perspective that we use to interpret what we're focusing on. And then we take action based off of however we process that information that we took in. So there those three steps: focus, meaning, and action. We call them the three powers. But if you just remember, take in sensory information, process it, take action. So with the brain that is just surviving, we see that show up in those three steps. They're not very focused. Their brain is just kind of all over. Or they're focused on the things that are potential threats. They're always focused on, how can I stay safe? How can I survive? How can I not die? How can I not get hurt? So a lot of times this manifests as low-key anxiety or even clinically diagnosed anxiety. The other thing that is kind of a common factor is that our perceptions don't line up with reality, whether we're aware of that or not. Sometimes we just feel like everybody hates us, but in reality we know that it can't be everyone that hates us, and I'm a likable person, but they still feel that everyone's out to get them or that the world is unfair. And the last thing, action. You just have a hard time taking action, or you're taking action but it's not producing any results. You're not very effective. Maybe you're busy, but you're not really getting anything done. On the other hand, a surviving brain, we see the opposite. You're focused, and you're focused on what matters to you and where you want to go versus the past and how do I stay safe right here. Your perceptions line up with reality, and you're able to see things around you clearly and understand what's going on. And then lastly, action. You're motivated. You can take action, and your action produces results. You don't feel like you're just stuck on a treadmill constantly running and not getting anywhere, because you're able to take more effective action, step off of the treadmill, and actually start moving towards your goals. So, Grant, that's a very big picture idea of what does it mean to survive versus thrive? What are the symptoms? So I wrote down a list that I was thinking of earlier, because I know not everybody's going to be able to relate to that high, big picture principle, what's going on in my brain. So, Matt, I'm going to invite you to also listen to these and see if there's something that stands out to you. There's a few that I put down specifically because I noticed I was feeling them as well. You only feel motivated when you're under pressure or you have a deadline. You check your phone first thing in the morning out of compulsion, not out of intention. So you're using it as a distraction, not as a tool. Your calendar is full, but there's nothing that you're excited about. So again, you're busy, but you don't feel drawn to any of these things that you're doing. You constantly think about escape and how you're going to numb out and unwind after a long day. So you're thinking about vacation, what TV show you're watching. When you hit a wall at work on a project, you pull your phone out and check social media. Or here's another one that I don't think a lot of people recognize. You're the strong one or you're the fixer, but you don't feel seen or valued. You might even be hitting your goals, but you still feel empty. Or as soon as you hit that goal, you're immediately thinking of the next thing that you have to accomplish. There's no sense of fulfillment and reward. Or you wake up with dread or urgency, or just absolute laziness. It takes a long time to get out of bed because there's nothing in your day that you're excited about. You're tired all the time, even after sleep. You are, instead of finding things that bring you joy, you find things that numb the painful feelings, even if that's boredom or uneasiness or I wasn't very productive today and I don't want to think about that, so I'm going to jump on social media. You're productive, but you don't always feel like you are there doing the things. You're just in autopilot. Your self-talk is shame-based, and it's always about what you could have done better, or how you're not living up to your potential. You only rest when your body forces you to. This one I'm guilty of sometimes. I work until I get sick, and then I get frustrated that I'm sick because I can't be doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing. You get irritable when it's quiet or when there's nothing going on. So it's uncomfortable to just sit with yourself. You mentioned this one. If you cannot sit and just enjoy the silence without feeling a reflex to grab your phone and pull it out and check your email or messages or social media, chances are you're very uncomfortable with your own thoughts and you don't want to listen to what your brain has to say, because you know your brain has some good points about why you're not doing so well and you don't want to hear it. And lastly, you use caffeine to feel energized and focused, and then you use alcohol or other drugs to calm yourself down and relax at the end of the day. So essentially artificially trying to navigate your circadian rhythm versus being excited about the things that are going on in your day, and then feeling relaxed and tired because you worked really, really hard and you accomplished a lot. So hopefully people are able to recognize at least one of those. Like I don't want people to be in survival mode, but I also don't want people to not recognize that they're in survival mode. Like most of us are, and I don't want people to be running away from the fact that they are just surviving. I want people to feel uncomfortable. I want people to be uneasy with where they're at right now, because I know that's going to be the spark for growth. And more than feeling comfortable progressing and achieving what you want in your life, I think that's far more important than just being in our little comfort zone and not really getting anywhere.
Very cool. And I love all those examples. Maybe I could put in my 2 cents. For me, there was a couple of other things that stood out as I was, and I still struggle. You know, there are days where I either fall back or let some of those negative things that used to hold me back creep back into my mental space. But overall, I'm doing a much better job. But what I used to feel, I would describe it as a numbness. I'd wake up in the morning and I would feel the Groundhog Day effect. Mm-hmm. Every day I'd wake up and it seemed like I was observing myself walking into the kitchen to grab that coffee, to drive to work, to ride up the escalator. And it just seemed like Groundhog Day. It repeats and repeats. I also had the infamous Sunday night blahs. You go to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You have that great Friday night because you're concealing your real feelings with alcohol. Mm-hmm. Saturday, you're out occupying yourself, doing unhealthy things, typically eating food with your buddy in the bar, watching football or something like that. But Sunday, you got to pay the piper. I got to get up at 7 a.m. and you start that process all over again, the Groundhog Day. Yeah. But Sunday, I could never sleep. Because in my mind, I was having the conversation. You don't want to go to work tomorrow. You're not motivated by that. You hate your job. And I'd have this voice whispering in my ear all night long, and I'd start Monday off just feeling absolutely wrecked. I would also say another thing I felt was monkey mind. When I closed my mind to sleep, I had all these thoughts, mainly negative thoughts, competing for space in my brain. my brain was on kind of like this autopilot. Like I put the record on fast and I could hear the words, but I could never settle it down.
Mm-hmm.
So all these things started to happen to me, and then ultimately, you know, it's almost like you can no longer ignore it. I mean, and I hope that's the one thing I want people to get out of this. Don't ignore it. You've said before in some of your videos, pain or some form of negative emotion is a signpost. It's telling you something in your life. Don't just drive by it. Like, look at the signpost. And finally, you know, be okay with, you know, looking at the person in the mirror and asking yourself, okay, it's time to make change. So very interesting. And some of those the things you spelled out, very, very familiar to me.
There's this weird thing that happens where all those symptoms that I had mentioned before, they kind of become bragging points for a lot of people. We see it especially in corporate world, just in general workforce. You know, like I remember in college, people bragging about how little sleep they got. It was like this competition. It's like, well, I only got 3 hours of sleep because I was up night studying for the OChem final. And I'm like, congratulations. You just stunted your brain's ability to learn and grow, and you're probably going to get burnt out later today and not be able to learn anything. We see it in the corporate world where people they get this sense of significance and importance from just sacrificing their entire life for the growth of the business. And it's like, yeah, short term, maybe this week the company's going to get a lot of deliverables, but in the long run, how does a business benefit by burnt out executives or even just burnt out low level personnel? What's going to lead to the longest true growth and success for a company is when people have balanced lives and they're excited about their work and they can come in day after day after day and put in good work. I don't care if you're able to put in 20 hours today and get a ton done. You can't do that repeatedly. And companies are not just a week-long project. They're decades and decades, and they need employees that can do good, consistent work decade after decade.
So Bryson, we always talk about what it means to thrive as a human being. And it's so important that we as human beings thrive as much as we can, because we have one shot at this thing we call life. You know, there's no dress rehearsals. And we've discussed in this podcast and in previous clips the importance of getting out there and achieving your best life, to achieve that thriving life. It makes you a great human being, it makes you a great spouse, it makes you a great friend, a great teammate. But there's also another really interesting part to this whole equation. As a leader, when you walk through those doors, if you're not thriving, you're going to create a team dynamic or a culture that isn't thriving. And it's a really scary thing, because work has the potential to take a thriving individual who walks into the door 8 a.m. Monday morning and sends them home at 5 p.m. not thriving, because the culture beats them up so badly, or the leader they report to is themselves not thriving. So what does it mean to be a thriving leader, and why is it so important for companies to ensure that their leadership thrives and their that doesn't sound so good. Sorry. It's a meaty topic.
Yeah.
Maybe I
it's like, because when it comes down to it, I feel like the topic of, people have answered the question of, why do you need a good leader who is thriving? But they've answered it just in this one way, and there's other ways to answer that question that are more unique to our understanding and our principles. So it's like I think the question is how do we ask that question in a way where it is natural to get the answer that nobody else has talked about? Does that make sense? Like people always talk about, it's like, oh, you got to be a good example and you got to lead by example. And, you know, you like a good leader has to understand, you know, how to do this so that they can teach it like people on their
I,
team.
I think there's this aspect that you as an individual, you want to strive to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple. It means you're living a better, happier, healthier life. It means your quality of life is most likely going to be better. And it means those people around you are going to experience benefits for the same reasons.
Mm-hmm.
As a leader, it's your role to walk through those doors. Because if you're carrying into those doors that negative energy, it permeates the culture, it permeates the team dynamic.
Yeah.
And you then impart your energy onto the team, and that imparts energy onto the culture. And I think that it's our job to help our friends, our family, our employees thrive. Now there's the obvious reason, which is we want people to be happy, healthy. It's our role as human beings to support each other. But as a leader, you also get huge benefits from this because you're taking a team and moving them from this confined state where they're not high performing, they're barely surviving, and you're moving it into an elevated state, a high performance team with a high performance culture. And it's the simplest investment there is. It's simply helping people thrive. Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff that we teach in our program, it's like buying a fitness pass at a gym. It's the best investment you can make as a business leader, as a business owner, because the ROI is clear. Mm-hmm. You can either have an army of people who are unmotivated, who don't like their job, who don't like coming into work Monday, who are not engaging the logical part of their brain because they're barely surviving to solve problems and be creative. Or you can have an army of individuals who are motivated, they're inspired, they look up to you as a leader, they're using their logical parts of their brain, they're solving problems, they're creative. You know, not only are you getting the ROI of fewer sick days, lower turnover, you're creating a better brand awareness for your company because anybody that interacts with that team is always going to remember it.
A thriving team is not just putting in tons of hours and sacrificing everything else in their life in order to have a lot of, in order to make significant progress on this week's project. A thriving team is when individuals come excited about work, they have full access to their brain, they're not stuck in these reactive patterns, and they're committed to a vision, to accomplishing something as a team. That's real thriving. And I think because people have this misconception, they avoid thriving because they think thriving is going to lead to burnout. But true thriving doesn't lead to burnout. It leads to growth. And I wish more companies could understand that. We hear all the time that leaders, like good leaders, need to lead by example. And I think people just assume that people will see their leader doing something a certain way and then just pick up on that habit, or they'll just learn by example. But that's not actually what's going on. When we have someone who's a true leader that has this presence, that is clearly, you know, the boss, someone that people want to impress, that they look up to him, what ends up happening is we, as everybody else, mirrors their behavior, including their mindset, because mindset is essentially a set of behaviors with a common source. When we see a good leader living a certain way, in this case, thriving, everybody under his influence is going to actually mirror his behavior. They're not just doing it because he's the boss, and they're not just doing it because he said in their training this is how they're supposed to be doing it, and they're going to listen to him. They do it because they recognize his position, his or her position, and they subconsciously start to pattern their own behaviors after the behavior of their leaders. Granted, a key to all of that is that you have a leader that is likable and that has evidence of their success, that people want to become who they are. But without that, then we're not going to get any sort of just learned behavior just because a boss came in and gave a training on some new thing that they're implementing. It comes from everybody under their influence subconsciously mirroring their behavior and their lifestyle patterns, including mindset.
Yeah, I agree a lot, and I think that a company's best investment is helping their leaders learn how to thrive. And I have to stress this. This is really important because I've been in the corporate world for a long time. There are lots of courses out there. There's lots of books on leaderships. There's lots of books on things like mindset, culture, communication, problem solving. These are all very valuable books. But what we're talking about here is it's like supercharging your employees. It's like giving them access to a part of their brain and to a part of their human system that elevates their game and makes them happier employees, gives them a better quality of life. So this is a win-win situation. But this doesn't come through reading a book. It doesn't come simply by meditating or by having an executive coach come in and speak to your team. It's something you have to practice. It's something you have to implement tactically. You have to give these tools and this support to your employees because at the end of the day, it's the best investment you'll make. They'll be coming into work more charged, more energized, excited to get to work, solve the problems, and make progress towards the goals that the company set forth. So, start with the leaders. Start with the leaders because they set the groundwork, they create the culture. But also don't forget your employees. It's like sending them to the gym. You're only going to get massive ROI on that investment. So we've talked a lot about thriving and the power and the benefits it brings. But the other word I use an awful lot is this concept of transformation. And it gets overused all too often. Some people think of it as kicking an addiction. Some people think of it as a physical transformation, a weight loss transformation, for example, or a fitness journey. But I want to make it really clear. The concept of thriving and transformation have a lot in common. And for me, they mean something so much more than just getting fit or getting slightly happier. For me, transformation is the complete brand new tomorrow that we all want in our lives. And the best example I can give is when a parent is pushing their child on a bike and they let go of that bike for the first time and the child starts pedaling and they're free. In that moment, the moment the hand left the bike, the child's world changed. He or she gained new capabilities, can now explore the world in a completely different way, have gained independence, can move towards objects or objectives in their lives. It's completely changed their perspective. And here's what's really cool about this. If the child falls over, the child gets back up and tries again. Children have this courage to try to take that first pedal stroke. We as humans, adults, we stop. We get scared. We don't want to let go of the table and take that first step. We don't want our parent to let go of that seat. But when we do, we have a completely different outlook on the world. Our world has changed. We're gaining new capabilities. We're becoming the person we want to become, and we're making the vision we want to be our reality. So I want people to get a sense of energy and excitement around the concept of thriving and transformation. But all that said, Bryson, this still comes back to the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the neuroscience behind transformation, change? What is the neuroscience behind that? What's going on with the mind? And why do you often say we have to recruit the mind in this process?
Yeah, well, if we're talking about real, true change, not just I changed a behavior or I kicked an old habit, true transformation incorporates some element of their identity. And our one of the greatest motivators that we have is to live according to who we believe we are. So I think a key part of this transformation is a shift in our perception of our identity. And really just a total shift in our identity, not even just our perception of it. We could argue about the nuances of whether we're just uncovering our own identity or we're changing our identity. But the key thing is that we start to view ourselves differently. The person who truly had a weight loss transformation, they don't see themselves as overweight anymore. They look in the mirror and they recognize that they're in shape, that they are a healthier person than they were before. They're not just working out and eating differently. They are now a healthy person. When we have a transformation in our career, we're like, I'm just a low-level employee. I'm just this. I'm just that. And then we have this shift and we step into a leadership role and have that transformation. All of a sudden I'm a leader. I'm a manager. I have the power and ability to influence and shape the future of this company. It's no longer just about what you're doing. It's about who you are. The little kid riding their bike, they're no longer just a kid who's learning how to ride a bike. They're a kid who knows how to ride a bike without mom or dad's help. And that is huge. Being able to see yourself as that person is just as important as doing the thing itself. If a kid has no concept that they can ride the bike on their own, they still think mom or dad are still holding them up. It doesn't matter that they can do it on their own. They don't think they can. Like, they need this moment where they turn a corner and they see mom or dad standing way back there not helping them ride. And then that's the moment that they start to believe that they can ride a bike. That's what shifts their ability and their perception. That sounds all kind of vague and philosophical and psychological, but it's really neuroscience based. Like, we have pathways dedicated for our perception of ourself, and those pathways influence our behaviors, our reactions, our habits, what we want, what we desire, what we don't want, all of that. And that all goes back to our identity and our perception and our beliefs about our identity.
This month for Heroes Unleashed is all about having a thriving summer. And so much of the stuff we talk about, it's deep, it takes time, it takes work. But there are these incredibly powerful tips and tricks we can leverage from the neuroscience world that we can implement immediately that will help us thrive this summer. Give us your top 3 or 4 really quickly, why they work, what they do.
Yeah, so one, I love that during the summer, the sun rises earlier because it's so much easier to wake up early and have a really awesome start to your day. For me, it's like, if I have a good morning, I'm going to have a good day. If I have a crappy morning, I'm going to have a crappy day. So it's easier to get up, which means I can fit in those 2 or 3 extra things that are really going to set the tone and help me just program my focus for the rest of the day. For me, that's sitting in front of a window or even outside with the sun hitting my eyes to help anchor my circadian rhythm, and then like meditating or journaling or reading or even just sitting there in silence, sipping on some herbal tea while I just enjoy the sunlight. So take advantage of the earlier start to the day and do those few things that you've been wanting to do that you just know would help you have a really awesome day. The other thing, get outside. There's so many benefits to being outside and getting some direct sunlight. Obviously, we don't want to just get out and get burnt, but vitamin D is huge. It's associated with every single positive health outcome. Hospitals are having huge success having wheeling patients out onto the roof so they can get sunlight while they're trying to recover from surgery, from illnesses, anything. It boosts hormone production, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, like all these different hormones. Vitamin D is a key factor in that. And then also just the sleep benefits. Getting sunrise first thing in the morning makes it easier to wake up right in the morning the next day. Getting some sunlight right around sunset, that actually kind of inoculates us from blue light from screens later on in the night, meaning they're not going to have as much of a negative impact on us. And then a little bit of sunlight middle of the day speeds up metabolism, increases hormone production, helps boost our immune system, increases muscle growth, all of these things. Everybody would benefit from a little bit of sunlight first thing in the morning, middle of the day, and in the evening.
Bryson, the other day we were talking about July and helping our network and our community thrive this summer. And one of the things I mentioned to you that I'm doing that's new is this thing called paddleboarding. You know, I've run and rode across Canada, but now I want to try something completely new, something that's completely challenging. Like, I'm really struggling with it because of balance and mobility. And you were super excited for me. You're like, that's amazing. It's going to help you in so many ways. And you kind of started going down some different paths. It was intriguing. Can you rewind that for me and maybe share with everybody else what you told me?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily specifically paddleboarding that is going to boost neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. It's the fact that you're doing something new. You're like the new physical activity, your cerebellum is constantly having to adapt and learn how to manage this new type of sensory input. There's this really, really cool study where they learned a ton about neuroplasticity. Essentially neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt itself, it's actually a skill. It's not just an event. It's something that we can practice and get better at. And one of the best ways to practice it is to do something new, especially when that requires us to learn how to work within a new set of rules. So like learning a new sport was like pickleball or spike ball, or even a classic that you've never played before, like basketball or soccer. When our brain has to learn a set of rules and then how we're supposed to operate within those rules, or we're learning a new activity like paddleboarding and we have to learn what works and what doesn't work to keep me standing up. Anytime we do that, our brain gets better at neuroplasticity and it gets better at changing itself. And what I get really excited about is when those activities include an element of physical exercise, because with physical exercise, we also get a boost in our neurogenesis, which is the birth of new neurons. So not only does our brain get better at learning and adapting, but at the same time, we're supplementing new neurons, which just supercharges that entire process.
That is so cool. Okay, so get outside, try something new that puts you in a new sort of environment where you have to learn new rules, new ways of behavior while trying something new. Neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, super powerful.